Hi, I'm Gray Cook. This is Brett Jones, and we want to talk to you today about safe strength. I'm sort of the guy that started the functional movement screen thing going, and we've got an entire team of people helping us teach and collect data and even publish on the functional movement screen. So it's gotten way bigger than we intended it, but I think that's a good thing because it's offered us a perspective that I didn't get in physical therapy school, that I don't think he got in his athletic training curriculum. We didn't get as strength coaches or Olympic weightlifting coaches or Olympic weightlifters. And I think one of the things that came to us from the movement screen is we have a country of people that don't move well. Even great athletes are lacking one of the fundamental movement patterns. And I think the assumption when people hear me speak about the movement screen and see the videos I put up in my presentation is, oh my gosh, I can't believe the squat is that limited. And I think people think the movement screen is all about mobility. And good stability yields better mobility. So you can dance the model, and I see some people, whether they admit it or not, they're all about getting the mobility, or they're all about getting the strength and stability, and you got to do what the body needs. I think what the movement screen information, the data, the thousands of people that we've had an opportunity to screen has shown us is there is a fundamental lack of strength even in some of our best functional fitness programs. So I know the best strength coaches in the country, would like to at least think I do. And somehow in their program, they're always sneaking in some strength. Now it looks functional, it looks fluffy, and they got the balls and the bands and all the other stuff too, but there's still a lot of strength in there. They're not missing it or they wouldn't be as good as they are. What we wanted to do today is put together a project that helps you zero in on a way that you can achieve some fundamental strength in a very short amount of time, and that strength will actually turn into better mobility, better core stabilization, better spine protection, and we're not even going to teach you more than one exercise right now. This whole DVD is to end up at one structurally sound, crisp exercise that we're going to show you in just a second. But Brett, talk about strength. What? What are we talking about here?
Strength can be boiled down in a couple different ways. At its simplest form, strength is the ability to produce tension within the body. When you contract your muscles and act in all that 25-cent word stuff happens and the muscle gets shorter, that's producing tension within the body. That's how we move, that's how we pick things up, that's how we throw a baseball or knock a defensive lineman off the line. So the ability to produce strength, to produce tension within the body is something that we have to train, we have to work with. That range that it happens in, though, is that low rep range. It's that 1 to 5 reps of something that is actually difficult. We want to see an athlete be able to move an appreciable amount of weight. We're not training power lifters, although something I like, and I do train some power lifters, and we're going to train them a little bit differently. But even for the average population, the mindset has become that strength isn't important. Sculpting and bodybuilding and all of these different things, and then take us away from our base of strength. When we lose that ability to produce tension within the body, use the body as a unit, and do something in a coordinated fashion that's actually strength-based, we lose a lot of what I think is the base for our athleticism, our flexibility, and our movement skill, because if you're not strong enough to do it, it's just not going to happen.
Well, I think one of the things that I hear you saying is we've got the best technology in the world right now for training people, conditioning people, and taking athletes to peaks that they've never even realized before, and yet injury rates haven't really dropped a lot. So we would think as we have the science and technology to squeeze extra drops of performance out of everybody in every sport, whether it be high-end power or high-end endurance, we see times being shaved, we see weights going up. We should see a ratio of injuries going down, because if we were structurally sound, if we were doing what we're supposed to be doing, not only are we enhancing performance, but we're preventing injury. I work with a lot of professional sports strength coaches, and I'll ask them, what's your number one job? It ain't performance enhancement, it's injury prevention. Their number 2 job is maintaining performance, and if they do get somebody who needs that elevated, they'll bump it up a little bit, but most of the people they recruit, most of the people in their gym are already performing at a high level or they wouldn't have gotten a contract. So you think about this, prevent an injury. Now, as a personal trainer, one client, gets injured on your watch, or just has bad body mechanics and pulls out their back starting a lawnmower. How many sessions did you lose that you really didn't have to lose because nothing that you did in the gym prepared them for a lawnmower that didn't really want to start? So there is a fundamental strength issue that I think explains why some people are actually performing better, running faster, running longer, but still leaving themselves wide open for injury. Because in the short haul, you can do something wrong and still get a very, very right result. And it doesn't really justify it. The end doesn't really justify the means. So I think what Brett is saying is there's a fundamental strength that's sort of gotten out of the weight room. We still got the plates. We just don't lift many of them. We do 15 reps instead of 5. And the whole thing is, well, we're burning more calories at 15 reps. But the thing is, with those lower reps, you're going to shock your basal metabolic rate. You're actually going to build some strength and muscle. And in the long run, if we kept a 48-hour metabolic cart following you around, you're probably going to do better with the lower rep lifts because your body takes them serious. And if you know what you're doing, you're not going to be able to cheat because cheating is bad form, and bad form will render you weaker. Now, I want to talk about why. Why are we doing strength when almost every recreational thing we do, Brett, is either power or endurance? Baseball, boom, I'm sitting on a bench. And now I explode and hit something or throw something. Soccer, it's burst, burst, burst. Basketball, burst, burst, burst. These are actually all anaerobic or power activities. And then all of a sudden, we've got the recreational runner, the triathlete, the cross-country skier, the rower. So we've got basically in our, if you go into a sports authority or something like that, everything is either geared around the explosive power field and court sports where I'm throwing, repelling a ball, or endurance, where I'm just basically wearing out rubber shoes all the time. Now, if everything we're doing is either on one end of the spectrum, endurance or explosive power, why are we working strength?
Strength is the foundation for almost all human movement. If you're not strong enough, the body's not going to give you the mobility to be able to do the other things. Strength over time is power. Guess what? Strength over time is also endurance. How long can you keep producing strength for that event? People look at running as an endurance event. Running can be looked at as a power event. How much force are you producing against the ground with each step? That's a strength move.
Right.
Now, strength is always functional. You run something called the functional movement screen, and if there's a trend in the country of functional training. Strength is always functional. If you maintain your mobility and your movement skills and you use your base of strength to move better, you have better potential for better performance. So strength is that missing key. What's been lost in the functional training, we've had conversations about this, and this has been one of your frustrations, is people hear the term functional and all of a sudden they're on one foot on an unstable surface with a 5-pound weight, and yeah, they're getting some proprioception and they're doing some good things, but the weight's so light that there's not a carryover to their base of strength. So we want to get them back to using that strength. When you laid out the functional movement screen, you have that foundation, the big piece of the pyramid, that on which the other pieces are built. Strength is that base that allows everything else to function real well.
No, I think Greg Rose of the Titleist Performance Institute has done probably more research in golf fitness than anywhere else, and Titleist is an excellent resource for golf fitness if you're working for golfers. Greg has done some research. He has demonstrated that the best golfers can deep squat. Not only can they deep squat, but when you throw a little weight on them, they actually lift it respectably, even if they don't really train the squat a lot. And those people who are struggling with golf, spending lots of money on lots of lessons and equipment, are working around a body that can't deep squat. Now, what did we learn from this? You really don't squat in the sport of golf unless you're retrieving a putt. And if you sink as few as I do, you really don't have to do that much. But the point is, we look at golf and we want to pull things and simulate swings. And what I think Greg has so eloquently demonstrated is that the hip is a mobile joint, and it's the driving force that's the secret behind some of these guys that really aren't big or buff, but they're driving the heck out of a golf ball. Now, what we're saying here is you deem an exercise functional by what it produces, not by what it looks like. So there's a lot more things you could do in the gym that look like the golf swing, but yet will actually distort a beautiful natural pattern. And there's something fundamental that all 1.5-year-olds can show you how to do called a deep squat. It's part of our movement screen, not because sports use the deep squat. Sports use the things that make the deep squat possible. So the core stability, the hip mobility, the body awareness, the spinal alignment, the foot position, the knee position, the shoulders being relaxed, the neck not being toned up, all drops into a deep squat. These are things the great golfers haven't lost, and they implement those in their swing. So I think what Brett is saying is, just because it looks functional may not mean that it is, and just because it doesn't look functional doesn't mean it's not. It's what it produces. You judge a tree by its fruit, what it yields, and that's what we're talking about with functional exercise. Now, I think what we want to do now is say, you're telling me that strength is fundamental, but we know if we've got a country of people who have very poor mobility, who have not done any strength training, how are we going to put strength training on them when we know responsibly they may owe us 2 months of yoga and stretching and flexibility and maybe even body work before we let them bend over and pick up weight and do things like that? When do we start strength? Can we start it right away?
Yes.
Okay.
After screening, after making sure that just a base level of mobility is there, you want to start incorporating strength as soon as safely possible. So rather than waiting 3 months, rather than saying, oh, you know, we're going to get you endurance first and then we're going to work your strength, or, you know, trying to circumvent the issue.
Right.
The beauty of screening and making sure that the basic movement patterns are there is we know we can now safely load you. So that may be a couple weeks to regain a toe touch or regain a deep squat, something of that nature, and then we're going to start loading you in a strengthening activity. Am I going to take my 80-year-old client who hasn't touched their toes in 5 years and put them on a straight bar deadlift the first day? No, of course not. I'm going to screen that person. I'm going to work with them. We're going to regain some mobility, and I'm going to get them doing a very partial range deadlift that's going to start to activate the hips. And one of the consistents that you see in athletics, daily life, is we should be hip-centered creatures. We move from here, we produce power from here. This is, when we talk about the core of the body, everybody thinks of the rectus abdominis and the six-pack. The core incorporates the hips. This is the core of our movement, so we got to address the hips in a strengthening fashion.
Well, I think that is profound in itself. Rewind, listen to that again. I did an article for PT on the Net called The Backside of the Core, because I think a lot of people forget that the core isn't just what's on the front of Men's Journal or Women's Fitness when somebody's sporting a six-pack. Everybody looks at butts. That's the core too. And the backside of the core is something that's often forgotten. And when we consider the backside of the core, now we're thinking, okay, this is the core. The hips are included. The hips are the driver, the engine. This is almost the transmission. It distributes power, okay? So when this hip does something, the power goes into the body. And if I'm running, it goes through the body and to the other hip. If I'm throwing or striking, it goes through the body and transfers into. So, you know, this is the engine. This is the drive shaft and transmission. You're not really supposed to bend the drive shaft and transmission that much. The engine's supposed to have a lot of movement. This is supposed to direct and transfer energy. And yes, we do see the spine get into bendable positions in sports and activity. But look at the strike, look at the hit, look at the impact, look at the contact. The spine usually finds neutral. And when the spine is not in neutral during the big load, that's when we get injuries. So yes, you're going to see somebody kick a football and then flex their spine and come back out. But when they're making contact, when their foot is driving through the ball, their spine's up. When the martial artist is making contact, the spine is up. When the offensive lineman is blocking, the spine is up. And that's what we want to do. We don't just want to follow the spine through an activity. Look at when the spine has its most stress. The best spines in the world will find neutral. Now, that basically takes us to how. How are we going to get this strength on somebody who has no strength background, and what exercise are we going to pick?
We're going to go with the deadlift.
You're scaring me because the first word of that is like death and dead, and I think that's why we don't even talk about the deadlift in the average gym with the average personal trainer anymore, because number one, it's called a deadlift, so it could kill someone, right? And clients are probably going to be unbelievably scared because the closest thing they've seen to a deadlift is maybe a powerlifting meet when somebody's veins are bulging and they're wearing tight little suits and not really looking like they're having fun or being comfortable. What are you talking about?
Well, the deadlift got its name because it's lifting a dead weight, a weight that is not moving. It's dead on the floor. Not that it ever killed anyone. So the name is old. You could call it the health lift.
Let's do that.
Call it whatever you want, as long as you do it. It's a movement pattern. We pick things up every day.
Yes.
So we bend over, pick things up. We may as well learn how to do it well. And that's one of the purposes between the deadlift. Now we've just centered on the hips and the core, and the hips being an integral part of the core, really two ways to train the hips. We can squat, we can deadlift. Why am I not choosing the squat? We screen the squat.
Right.
We make sure that that mobility and that movement pattern is there because it's just a great way to check overall movement and that foundational pattern for the body. However, when most people squat, they get quad dominant with their squat, not hip dominant. Right. That changes the squat right there. It becomes a harder thing to coach and to teach. The bar's in a different position, the spine's loaded in a different way. The squat is actually an extremely skilled lift. Deadlift can be a little easier pattern to get people into. It's an automatic hip pattern. We're going to get the glutes and the hamstrings. You made reference to the six-pack muscles versus the glutes and things like that. What I tell people all the time is this looks good, this performs good. So what's behind you is what's driving you and performing and things like that. We really want to focus on those glutes and hamstrings. The deadlift performed properly is that move that trains hip extension, really gets the glutes and hamstrings and the low back working the way that we want it working in real life.
I think you've convinced me. So two major moves of the body will use the hips correctly. That's the squat and the deadlift. We've seen the research that was done even 20 and 30 years ago that says if you train the upper body, there's no carryover below. But if you train the lower body, there is carryover above. So we like that because we don't have a lot of time. We want to be fundamental. We want to hit the core. We want to hit the hips. We want to hit the engine. We'd love to have a little upper body carryover. We all could use that. So now we've got a 2-for-1. We can do a lower body move and get some upper body benefit. And I think we put the squat and the deadlift on a seesaw. Now, I love to hear Mike Boyle lecture because he'll say, I may tell you something completely different next year, but right now this is what I believe. And I like that because you know what? We're trying to give you what we know the minute we know it, and if we learn something different, we'll tell you that too. I don't think I'm going to change the next thing I'm going to tell you. Maintain the squat, train the deadlift. I put out the functional movement screen in 1998 and put the squat at the very front of that because we're in a culture that has lost the fundamental pattern of squatting. Now, if you cannot squat or you have a client that cannot squat and they have a medical reason why they can't, don't worry about it. But if there's no medical reason why they can't, other than the fact that they can't, do the things that would reveal the squat to them. Help them at least get on a path to reconstructing that squat because in doing so, that is what their core needs. That's what their posture needs, their balance, their proprioception, all that. Maintain the squat. So if you can squat, maintain it. If you can't squat, work on a path to do it. But do you need to train the squat? If you're competing in the squat, yes, you do. If you're in a sport that requires deep movement into the squat, yes, do that. But basically maintain the squat, work it a little bit, but train the deadlift. Your body can deadlift a lot more often than it could squat safely. And one of these reasons is the foot and knee alignment. It is a much more massive neurological program to lower your body all the way through bending all these joints. Since we don't have great feet and since we've been not going barefoot, since we're a very big, sturdy, tall, robust culture, we don't find a lot of reason to squat anymore, but we sit quite a bit, which is completely counterproductive to squatting. So I'm making the statement right now. This is one I don't think I'm going to change because I've been looking at movement patterns, like I said, since 1998, trying to quantify and objectify what we see. You got to exercise the hips. You want the carryover. The two ways to do it are the squat and deadlift. More often than not, people will learn the deadlift quicker. You can train it more often. You can have less backfires with the deadlift. You got a squat that's not happening, work on it, maintain it, do the corrective strategies. If you're built to squat, you already know it, just like if you're built to run and if you're built to climb. But almost everybody can do that deadlift. It's less body angle dependent, it's less lever arm dependent, and it is so conducive to exactly what you need. What did I say? The motor moves, the transmission and drive shaft transfer energy. So now we've basically spent the entire first part of this DVD telling you Safe Strength has a lot of things that are built into it. And we're going to give you one lift that, yes, it's a catch-all for almost everybody you're working with because it can benefit the power people, it can benefit the endurance people, it can benefit the posture people, and it can benefit the people who are just interested in basically getting through life and not having some of those nagging problems that lifting and carrying things that we all do can impose. So let's get started.